Captain Ji-hoon Park felt his boots touch the strange crystal floor as he stepped out of Earth's diplomatic shuttle. The surface beneath him wasn't like any metal or stone he knew. It was alive somehow, glowing with soft blue light that pulsed, like a heartbeat. Behind him, his 3 teammates followed nervously. Lieutenant Min-ho Kim kept checking his weapon, even though they all knew it would be useless here. Communications officer Yuna Lee clutched her translation device tightly, her knuckles white with tension. Xenobiologist Hana Choi stared wide-eyed at everything around them, trying to record as much as possible with her instruments. The palace of the Veltharan Empire stretched endlessly in all directions. Towers of living crystal reached toward alien stars, and bridges of pure light connected floating platforms that defied gravity. Everything here seemed impossible by human standards. The air itself shimmered with energy that made the hair on Ji-hoon's arms stand up. He could taste something metallic and electric on his tongue with each breath. Ambassador Taehyun's final briefing echoed in Ji-hoon's mind as they walked across the platform. The Veltharans ruled half the known galaxy through fear and power. Every species that had ever encountered them called them the Mind Crushers. Their queen possessed telepathic abilities so strong that she could freeze entire armies with a single thought. No creature had ever stood in her presence without being paralyzed instantly by her mental force. Dozens of previous diplomatic missions from other species had tried to meet with Queen Astra. All had failed the same way. The moment they entered her throne room, they became living statues, unable to move or speak until she dismissed them. Most were sent away immediately. Some were kept as curiosities in her crystal gardens. None had ever successfully negotiated with her or her empire. The massive doors ahead of them began to open without any visible mechanism. They simply melted apart like ice in sunlight, revealing the throne room beyond. The sight took Ji-hoon's breath away. The chamber was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium. Crystalline beings taller than any human filled the space, their bodies made of the same glowing material as the palace itself. They looked like living gemstones, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. At the far end of the room sat a throne that seemed carved from a single massive diamond. On it was Queen Astra herself, even more magnificent and frightening than the intelligence reports had described. She was at least 12 feet tall, her crystalline form shifting between colors, like an aurora. Light radiated from within her body, casting rainbow patterns across the walls and ceiling. Ji-hoon's teammates stopped at the entrance as they had planned. This moment was too dangerous for all of them to face together. If something went wrong, at least 3 humans would survive to warn Earth about what happened here. Ji-hoon walked forward alone, his footsteps echoing strangely in the vast chamber. Every Veltharan eye in the room focused on him as he approached their queen. He knew this single moment would determine everything. If humanity could somehow survive this encounter, they might find their place among the stars. If not, Earth would remain isolated and vulnerable, forever wondering what lay beyond their small corner of space. The weight of his entire species' future pressed down on his shoulders as he took each careful step toward the glowing throne. Queen Astra slowly rose from her massive crystal throne, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Her body was like a living diamond, 12 feet tall and radiating light from within. Colors flowed through her crystalline form like liquid rainbows, shifting from deep blue to brilliant white and back again. When she stood at her full height, the light emanating from her body was so bright that Ji-hoon had to squint slightly, but he refused to look away. The hundreds of Veltharan nobles filling the throne room began to hum with excitement. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. In over 1,000 years, no creature had ever remained conscious in their queen's presence once she unleashed her telepathic power. They watched like spectators at an arena, eager to see another species fall before their ruler's mental dominance. Queen Astra raised one crystalline hand, and the humming stopped instantly. The silence that followed was so complete that Ji-hoon could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He felt something building in the air around him, like the pressure before a thunderstorm. The energy was so thick he could almost see it, rippling through the chamber like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Then it hit him. The Queen's telepathic power crashed into the room like an invisible tsunami. Ji-hoon felt it wash over him, a crushing mental force that seemed to reach into his mind and try to grab hold of his thoughts. It was like having someone else's hands inside his skull, searching for the controls to his body and consciousness. The sensation was overwhelming and alien, unlike anything he had ever experienced. All around him, every living thing in the throne room stopped moving instantly. The crystalline guards at the doors became perfectly still statues. The floating servants that had been drifting through the air froze in place like suspended jewels. Even the nobles, despite their powerful telepathic abilities, stood motionless under their queen's mental command. Their glowing bodies dimmed as her power suppressed even their basic functions, but Ji-hoon remained standing. He blinked normally, breathed steadily, and kept his brown eyes focused directly on Queen Astra's brilliant blue gaze. The crushing mental pressure continued to pound against his consciousness, but it couldn't find anything to grab onto. His human mind was too chaotic, too unpredictable for her telepathic abilities to control. Where other species had orderly, logical thought patterns that her power could manipulate, Ji-hoon's brain was a storm of random emotions, scattered memories, and illogical connections. Queen Astra's confident expression began to change. Her glowing eyes widened with confusion, then disbelief. She had ruled for over a millennium, and her telepathic dominance had never failed. Not once. Every creature that had ever stood before her throne had been instantly paralyzed by her mental force. Yet this small, primitive human continued to stand there completely unaffected. She pressed harder, pouring more of her power into the telepathic assault. The crystalline walls of the throne room began to vibrate with the energy she was unleashing. Several of the frozen nobles started to crack under the pressure, thin lines appearing in their crystal bodies. But Ji-hoon just stood there, tilting, his head slightly as if he was listening to distant music. For the first time in her incredibly long life, Queen Astra experienced something completely foreign to her: failure. Her ultimate weapon, the telepathic power that had built her empire and maintained her rule, was useless against this strange creature from a backward planet. The shock of it hit her like a physical blow. The mighty queen of the Veltharan Empire, ruler of half the galaxy, froze in absolute astonishment. Not from her own power, but from the stunning realization that the impossible had just happened right in front of her. The moment Queen Astra's power failed, chaos exploded through the crystal throne room. The hundreds of Veltharan nobles who had been frozen solid suddenly came back to life, their crystalline bodies flashing with wild colors of panic and confusion. High-pitched chittering sounds filled the air as they communicated in their native language, their voices creating an almost musical chaos that echoed off the crystal walls. Some nobles pulsed with angry red light, others flickered between colors. So rapidly they looked like living strobe lights. Never in their long lives had they witnessed anything like this. The foundation of their entire civilization was Queen Astra's telepathic dominance, and a primitive creature from a backwater planet had just shattered that certainty with his mere presence. General Crix, the Queen's military advisor and closest confidant, stepped forward from the crowd of panicking nobles. His crystalline form was larger than most others, with sharp edges that caught the light like a weapon. Dark energy swirled within his transparent body as he pointed one jagged finger directly at Ji-hoon. "This creature is a threat to everything we are." Crix's voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by his crystalline structure. "He must be destroyed immediately before he can spread this infection to others. Our empire's security depends on our queen's power, and if word spreads that humans can resist us, every species in the galaxy will rebel." Other military nobles began to pulse with agreement, their bodies shifting to the same dark energy pattern as their general. The air in the room grew thick with tension as more voices joined the call for Ji-hoon's immediate execution. Some suggested studying him first, cutting him apart to understand how his brain worked. Others wanted to destroy Earth itself before more humans could pose a threat. But Queen Astra raised her crystalline hand high above her head, and the entire room fell silent instantly. Even in her confusion and shock, her authority was absolute. The panicking nobles stopped their chittering and flashing, waiting for their ruler's decision. Ji-hoon noticed that despite everything that had just happened, not one of them dared to disobey her command for silence. The Queen's brilliant blue eyes never left Ji-hoon's face as she tried once more to penetrate his mind. This time, instead of using brute force, she attempted a gentle probe, trying to slip past his mental defenses like a whisper. What she found inside his human consciousness was unlike anything she had ever encountered in 1,000 years of telepathic contact. Ji-hoon's thoughts were complete chaos, random memories mixed with current observations, mathematical equations tangled with childhood songs, tactical assessments interrupted by the smell of coffee from breakfast that morning. His mind jumped from wondering if his team was safe to remembering his sister's laugh, to calculating the distance back to his shuttle, to noticing how beautiful the crystal architecture was, all in the space of a few seconds. Where other species had organized logical thought patterns that her telepathy could read and control, humans seemed to think in multiple directions at once. It was like trying to catch smoke with her hands. Every time she thought she had grasped something in his mind, it slipped away and transformed into something completely different. "I am Captain Ji-hoon Park of the Earth Diplomatic Corps," Ji-hoon said calmly, his voice steady despite being surrounded by hundreds of agitated aliens calling for his death. "I've come here with a message of peace from humanity. We want to establish friendly relations with your empire and learn from your advanced civilization." Queen Astra stared at him in fascination. This small creature was either incredibly brave or completely insane. He stood in her throne room, surrounded by beings who could crush his spaceship like an insect, and he spoke of peace as if they were meeting in a garden instead of the heart of a galactic empire built on fear and domination. The more she tried to understand his mind, the more curious she became. After a long moment of silence, she made her decision. "You will be confined as my honored guest while I study this impossibility," she announced. "Guards, escort Captain Park to the crystal chambers. Treat him with respect, but ensure he cannot leave." The crystal chambers where the humans were kept were nothing like a prison. The walls were made of transparent crystal that shifted colors throughout the day, creating a warm, comfortable atmosphere. Soft light emanated from the ceiling, and the furniture seemed to grow naturally from the floor itself. It was beautiful, but Ji-hoon knew they were still prisoners, no matter how luxurious their cage might be. Queen Astra had allowed his entire team to join him after the first day. Lieutenant Min-ho Kim arrived looking tense and ready for a fight, but relaxed slightly when he saw that Ji-hoon was unharmed. Communications Officer Yuna Lee immediately began taking notes on everything she observed, her scientific mind fascinated. Despite their dangerous situation, xenobiologist Hana Choi was practically vibrating with excitement, thrilled to be studying an alien civilization from the inside. Every morning, Queen Astra would visit their chambers personally. She would stand just outside the crystal barrier that separated them, her towering form radiating soft light as she attempted to probe their minds. Ji-hoon had warned his team what to expect, but nothing could have prepared them for the sensation of having an alien consciousness trying to slip into their thoughts. Min-ho described it as feeling like someone was rummaging through his memories, like files in a cabinet. The Queen would encounter his tactical training mixed randomly with memories of playing soccer as a child in Seoul. His thoughts about defensive positions would suddenly shift to remembering his grandmother's cooking, then jump to analyzing the crystal technology around them, then back to wondering if his sister had received his last message home. Yuna's mind was even more chaotic to the Queen's telepathic senses. As a communications expert, her brain was constantly processing multiple languages at once. Queen Astra would try to follow her thought patterns, only to find Korean mixed with English, mixed with the alien languages Yuna was trying to learn. Her professional analysis of Veltheran communication methods got tangled up with childhood memories of singing with her mother and wondering what her boyfriend back on Earth was doing right now. But it was Hana's mind that seemed to fascinate Queen Astra the most. The xenobiologist's thoughts were a beautiful mess of scientific observations, poetic descriptions, and wild theoretical leaps. She would simultaneously analyze the crystal structure of their prison, compose mental poetry about the way light moved through it, and wonder if the crystalline beings could reproduce or if they were immortal. Her scientific training fought constantly with her artistic soul, creating a mental symphony that the Queen found utterly captivating. As days passed, the humans began to learn about their captors through conversations with their crystalline guards. These beings were more willing to talk than expected, and gradually a picture of Veltharan society emerged that shocked the humans. The Veltharans lived in perfect telepathic harmony. Every thought, every emotion, every intention was shared instantly across their collective consciousness. Lies were impossible because everyone could read everyone else's mind. Deception didn't exist in their language because the concept was meaningless to them. They had achieved perfect honesty and cooperation, something humans had dreamed about for centuries, but this perfect unity came with a terrible price. Because all Veltharans thought in similar patterns, because their minds were so synchronized, they had stopped being able to innovate centuries ago. Every new idea was immediately shared and analyzed by billions of minds that all worked the same way. If one Veltharan couldn't solve a problem, none of them could. Their civilization had become stagnant, preserved in crystal like their architecture. Guard spoke wistfully about the ancient times when their people could still create new things, when surprises were possible. They had traded creativity for peace, innovation for stability, and the unexpected for perfect order. Now they were slowly being surpassed by younger species who could still adapt and grow. Ji-hoon began to understand why Queen Astra was so obsessed with human minds. To her, their chaotic thoughts represented something her people had lost forever. The random connections, the illogical leaps, the beautiful mess of human consciousness was everything the Veltharans could no longer achieve. Humanity's mental storm wasn't just resistant to their telepathic control, it was a reminder of what they had given up to build their perfect empire. On the 7th day of their captivity, Queen Astra came to Ji-hoon's chambers alone. This had never happened before. Usually she was accompanied by at least a dozen guards and advisors, maintaining the formal dignity of her position. But this time she dismissed everyone and activated a privacy field that made the crystal walls opaque. Ji-hoon's teammates were in the adjoining room, giving him and the alien queen a chance to speak privately. She seemed different somehow. Her usual brilliant radiance was dimmed, and the colors flowing through her crystalline form moved more slowly, like someone deep in thought. Instead of towering over him from her full height, she lowered herself until she was sitting on the crystal floor, bringing her glowing eyes closer to his level. "Captain Park," she began, her voice softer than he had ever heard it, "I must tell you something that no outsider has ever learned, something that could destroy my empire if it became known throughout the galaxy." Ji-hoon leaned forward, sensing the weight of what was about to be revealed. In the past week, he had come to understand that Queen Astra was not the simple tyrant that Earth's intelligence reports had suggested. She was brilliant, ancient, and carrying burdens that few could imagine. "My people call our telepathic unity our greatest achievement," she continued, her form pulsing with sad blue light. "For thousands of years, it gave us power beyond measure. We could coordinate fleets across star systems instantly. We could share knowledge and experience without any loss or distortion. We eliminated war, crime, and suffering from our society because everyone understood everyone else perfectly." She paused, and Ji-hoon could see something like pain flickering through her crystalline features. "But perfection, Captain Park, is also a prison. When every mind thinks in harmony, when every thought is shared and analyzed by billions of identical consciousness patterns, something dies. We lost the ability to surprise ourselves. We lost the capacity for genuine discovery." The Queen's confession poured out like water from a broken dam. She explained how her empire had not developed any truly new technology for over 500 years. Everything they used was refined from ancient knowledge, polished and perfected but never fundamentally changed. They had become masters of efficiency, but slaves to their own mental synchronization. "Younger species pass us now in ways we cannot understand," she admitted, her voice heavy with a sadness that seemed to echo through the crystal chamber. "They develop new weapons, new sciences, new ways of thinking that we cannot predict or counter because we can no longer think in unpredictable ways ourselves. We maintain our empire, through the reputation of our past greatness, but that reputation grows weaker every year. Ji-hoon felt a chill as he began to understand the true scope of what she was telling him. The mighty Veltharan Empire, feared across half the galaxy, was slowly crumbling from within. Their greatest strength had become their fatal weakness. "When I touched your mind," Queen Astra continued, "I felt something I had not experienced. In centuries, chaos, beautiful, creative, impossible chaos. Your thoughts jump in directions that make no logical sense, yet somehow reach brilliant conclusions. You solve problems by not thinking about them directly. You create art by accident and discover science through play." She leaned closer, her glowing eyes intense with desperate hope. "Your species represents what we lost when we achieved perfection, the ability to truly innovate, the capacity for genuine surprise, the strength that comes from embracing chaos rather than controlling it." But then her light dimmed further, and fear crept into her voice. "General Crix and the Military Council see only the threat you represent. If humans can resist our telepathic control, they believe you could one day conquer us. They argue that we should destroy Earth immediately, before your chaos spreads to other species and turns the entire galaxy against us." Ji-hoon felt the weight of his entire species' survival pressing down on him. "What do you believe, Your Majesty?" Queen Astra was quiet for a long moment, colors swirling slowly through her crystal form. "I believe," she said finally, "that you might be our salvation rather than our destruction, but I must convince my council of that before they convince me otherwise." The next morning, General Crix stormed into the crystal chambers with a dozen heavily armed guards behind him. His crystalline form was darker than usual, swirling with angry red energy that made the air around him feel dangerous. Ji-hoon could tell immediately that something had changed overnight, and it wasn't good news for humanity. "Enough games," Crix declared, his voice cutting through the chamber like broken glass. "Every day we waste studying these primitives, our empire grows weaker. The Military Council has reached a decision, and even you, my queen, cannot ignore our unanimous vote forever." Queen. Astra followed behind him, her usual bright radiance dimmed with worry. She had clearly been arguing with her general for hours, and from the look on her crystalline face, she was losing the battle. The other council members filed in behind them, their bodies all pulsing with the same aggressive energy as Crix. "There is a situation that has been growing worse while we've been distracted by these humans," Crix continued, turning to address Ji-hoon directly. "A group of rebels called the Broken Crystals has been terrorizing the Outer Rim worlds for months. They are former Veltharans who were exiled for refusing to join our telepathic collective. Now they have stolen our advanced technology and are using it to attack innocent planets." Ji-hoon's teammate Minho stepped forward, his military training kicking in. "What kind of attacks are we talking about?" "They strike civilian targets without warning," one of the council members replied, her crystal form flickering with frustrated energy. "Trading stations, research outposts, even refugee camps. They use our own weapons against us, but they attack in ways that make no sense to our tactical planning. Because they rejected our mental unity, we cannot predict their movements." "General," Crix's eyes fixed on Ji-hoon with cold intensity, "our fleets have engaged them 17 times in the past 6 months, 17 failures. Every time we think we understand their strategy, they do something completely unexpected. Our greatest military minds cannot comprehend their chaotic tactics." Queen Astra finally spoke, her voice heavy with reluctance. "The Council has proposed a test. If humanity truly wants to prove they can be trusted allies rather than future conquerors, they will help us end the Shard crisis. If you succeed where our ancient empire has failed, we will consider a formal alliance. If you fail—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Ji-hoon felt his heart racing as he realized what they were asking. This wasn't just a test of trust. It was a trial by fire with the survival of both species hanging in the balance. "You want us to stop these broken crystals using our human tactics?" "Exactly," Crix replied with a cruel smile in his crystalline features. "You claim your chaotic thinking is superior to our organized methods. Prove it. Stop an enemy that has made fools of our greatest generals using their own unpredictable strategies." The other humans in the room exchanged worried glances. Yuna, was the first to speak up. What resources would we have access to? We can't fight a space battle with just the four of us and our diplomatic shuttle. You would have command of a full Veltharan battle group, Queen Astra explained. Our most advanced ships, weapons, and warriors would be at your disposal. But the tactical decisions would be yours to make. Our people would follow your orders, even if those orders seem illogical or impossible to us. Ji-hoon knew this was humanity's one chance to prove they belonged among the stars. If they succeeded, Earth could gain an alliance with one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. If they failed, their entire species might be wiped out as a potential threat. But there was something else at stake here too. The broken crystals were terrorizing innocent people across the galaxy, and if the Veltharans couldn't stop them, those attacks would continue indefinitely. My team and I will need full access to your intelligence reports about these rebels, Ji-hoon said, his voice steady despite the enormous pressure he felt. We'll also need detailed information about your previous failed attempts to stop them. Sometimes you can learn more from failures than successes. General Crix's crystalline form pulsed with surprised approval. Interesting. Most species would ask for our successful battle plans, not our defeats. That's because most species think like you do, Minho replied with a slight grin. We're not most species. Queen Astra looked at Ji-hoon with something that might have been hope flickering in her brilliant eyes. Does this mean you accept our challenge, Captain Park? Ji-hoon looked at his three teammates, saw the determination in their faces, and nodded. We accept. Humanity will help you end the Shard crisis. But we do this our way with our methods, even if they seem completely insane to your people. Agreed, Crix replied. But remember, human, if you fail, your entire species pays the price for your arrogance. The Veltharan war fleet was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Massive crystal ships that looked more like living organisms than military vessels floated in perfect formation around them. Each ship was a work of art, with surfaces that shifted colors and patterns as they moved through space. The flagship alone was larger than any human city, its crystalline hull pulsing with the same internal light as Queen Astra herself. Ji-hoon stood on the bridge of the flagship, feeling completely out of place among the towering crystalline officers. Queen Astra had insisted on leading the mission personally, much to General Crix's obvious displeasure. The general stood nearby, his dark form radiating skepticism as he watched the humans prepare for battle in ways that made no sense to his organized military mind. The broken crystals have fortified themselves in the Shard Belt, reported the ship's tactical officer, his crystalline body flickering with data streams. It's an asteroid field with over 10,000 large rocks, perfect for hiding ships and setting ambushes. They've been using it as their base for months. Minho studied the tactical display, his human eyes seeing patterns that the Veltharans had missed. They're using your own defensive strategies against you, he observed. Classic positions, textbook formations. No wonder you can't beat them. They're fighting exactly like you would fight. That is precisely the problem, Queen Astra admitted. Because they were once our people, they know all our standard tactics. Every time we attack, they counter us perfectly because they think like we think. Yuna was analyzing the communication intercepts from previous battles. Look at this, she said, pointing to the alien text scrolling across her screen. Every time your fleets approached, they repositioned their forces in the exact same patterns. They're not just using your tactics, they're trapped by them. They can't think outside Veltharan military doctrine any more than your own generals can. Hana was examining the scientific data about the asteroid field itself. The rocks in this belt have unusual mineral compositions, she noted. Lots of crystalline structures that could interfere with sensors. But they could also be used to amplify certain frequencies if we approached it the right way. Ji-hoon felt the familiar sensation of a plan forming in his chaotic human mind. It wasn't logical or organized like Veltharan strategy. Instead, it was a collection of seemingly random ideas that somehow fit together in ways that even he couldn't fully explain. Here's what we're going to do, he announced to the bridge full of confused crystalline officers. Minho, I want you to take half the fleet and begin a direct frontal assault on their strongest position. Make it obvious. loud and exactly what they'd expect from a traditional Veltharan attack. General Crix's form flashed with alarm. "That's suicide. They'll destroy your force before you get within weapons range." "No, they won't," Minho replied with a grin, "because while I'm attacking, I'm also going to be retreating. I'll advance and pull back at the same time, creating a pattern that looks like confusion but is actually designed to draw their ships out of hiding." The Veltharan officers looked at each other with complete bewilderment. In their perfectly logical minds, the idea of attacking and retreating simultaneously was not just impossible, it was meaningless. "Yuna, I need you to broadcast contradictory messages on all frequencies," Ji-hun continued. "Send fake retreat orders, false reinforcement calls, and tactical updates that completely contradict each other. Make it look like our command structure is falling apart." "But that will cause chaos in our own ranks," protested the communications officer. "Exactly," Yuna smiled. "Chaos is what we're good at. Your people will know to ignore the false messages because you'll brief them beforehand." "But the rebels will think we're incompetent and confused." Hana stepped forward with the most unusual request of all. "I need access to your mining equipment. Not weapons, mining tools. I want to use them to create artificial resonance patterns in the asteroid field." "Mining equipment?" Queen Astra asked, her crystalline form pulsing with confusion. "In the middle of a space battle. Trust me," Hana replied. "I'm going to turn those asteroids into the galaxy's largest musical instrument." As the human plans unfolded, the Veltharan officers grew more and more bewildered. Nothing the humans proposed followed any known military doctrine. Their tactics seemed designed to create maximum confusion rather than achieve clear objectives. But Queen Astra remembered how beautifully chaotic human minds were, and she gave the order to proceed. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Veltharan military history. Minho's forces charged forward while simultaneously falling back, creating a dance-like pattern that confused the rebel defenders. Yuna's contradictory broadcasts filled the communication channels with apparent panic while actually coordinating, a complex multi-layered strategy. And Hana's mining equipment began creating harmonic frequencies in the asteroids that interfered with rebel sensors in ways they had never experienced. Within 3 hours, the broken crystal's perfect defensive positions had collapsed into chaos. Unable to predict the humans' illogical tactics, they made mistake after mistake until their entire force was captured or destroyed. The shard crisis that had plagued the galaxy for months was over. General Crix stared at the tactical display in amazement. "Impossible," he whispered. "We achieved total victory without losing a single ship." The journey back to the Veltharan homeworld took 3 days, but for Queen Astra, it felt like 3 lifetimes. Something strange was happening inside her ancient crystalline mind, something that hadn't occurred in over 1,000 years of existence. As she sat in her private chambers aboard the flagship, trying to understand how the humans had achieved the impossible, she felt her thoughts beginning to move in completely new directions. For centuries, Queen Astra's mind had followed the same perfect patterns. Every decision flowed logically from established principles. Every problem was solved using methods that had worked for millennia. Her thoughts moved in straight lines, organized and predictable like the crystal formations that made up her physical body. But now, as she replayed the recent battle in her memory, she found herself thinking in ways that felt alien and exciting. She would start analyzing Minho's simultaneous attack and retreat strategy, then suddenly find herself wondering what human music sounded like, then jump to considering how Yuna's contradictory communications might apply to diplomatic negotiations. Her thoughts were becoming chaotic, unpredictable, and strangely beautiful. The change wasn't just happening to her. Throughout the fleet, other Veltharan officers were reporting similar experiences. Commander Thex, who had worked closely with Minho during the battle, described it as feeling like crystal facets in my mind that had been dark for centuries were suddenly lighting up. Lieutenant Zara, who had helped Yuna coordinate the confusing communications, said it was like discovering rooms in my consciousness that I never knew existed. The ship's science officer, Dr. Veltar, had been monitoring the phenomenon with growing excitement. "Your Majesty," he reported during their daily briefing, The neural activity patterns in our crystalline matrices are changing. Exposure to human thought processes appears to be reactivating dormant sections of our minds that we haven't used since the early days of our civilization. Queen Astra felt a thrill of possibility run through her crystalline form. Are you saying that interaction with humans is making us more than we were before? Not more exactly, Dr. Veltar replied, his body pulsing with fascination. But different. Our telepathic abilities remain unchanged, but we're developing new ways of using them, new patterns of thinking that we lost when we achieved perfect mental unity. The most dramatic change was happening to the warriors who had fought alongside the humans. These battle-hardened Veltharans, who had known only rigid military discipline for centuries, were suddenly coming up with creative solutions to problems they had struggled with for years. They were improvising, adapting, and even making jokes, something that had been almost impossible for their species since achieving telepathic perfection. General Crix was perhaps the most surprised by his own transformation. The stern military leader found himself approaching tactical problems from angles he had never considered before. During a strategy meeting, he shocked everyone by suggesting a defensive formation that was completely illogical by traditional standards but might work precisely because enemies wouldn't expect it. "I don't understand what's happening to me," he confessed to Queen Astra privately. "Yesterday, I was certain that humans were a threat to everything we represent. Today, I find myself thinking that they might be exactly what we need to survive as a species." The Queen nodded, understanding his confusion completely. "They haven't changed us into something foreign," she said thoughtfully. "They've reminded us of parts of ourselves we had forgotten existed. We became so focused on perfection that we forgot the value of imperfection." Word of the fleet's transformation spread quickly through Veltharan society via their telepathic network. Instead of the fear and resistance that Queen Astra had expected, she found curiosity and excitement. Her people were hungry for the kind of mental awakening that the warriors had experienced. They wanted to learn from the humans, to rediscover the creative chaos they had lost. The military council, which had been so opposed to any alliance with humanity, requested an emergency meeting as soon as the fleet returned home. But this time, their purpose was completely different. "Your Majesty," General Crix announced as he stood before the assembled council, "we have been wrong about the humans. They are not a threat to our empire. They are its salvation. We formally withdraw all opposition to an alliance and instead recommend the strongest possible partnership between our species." The vote was unanimous. Every member of the military council, including those who had been most vocal about destroying Earth, now supported full diplomatic relations with humanity. They had seen firsthand what humans could offer, not domination or conquest, but the gift of rediscovered creativity. Queen Astra felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries: genuine excitement about the future. Her empire wasn't crumbling after all. It was evolving, awakening, becoming something new and wonderful through contact with these chaotic, impossible, beautiful human minds. The transformation had only just begun, but already she could see the possibilities stretching out before them like stars in the darkness. Together, humans and Veltharans could achieve things that neither species could accomplish alone. The crystal throne room looked completely different than it had just weeks ago. Where once there had been rigid, perfectly organized rows of Veltharan nobles, now there was something that almost resembled controlled chaos. Crystalline beings moved in flowing patterns, their bodies pulsing with new combinations of colors that had never been seen before. Some were clustered in small groups, engaged in animated discussions that would have been impossible under their old telepathic conformity. Captain Jihun Park stood once again before Queen Astra's throne, but this time he wasn't alone. His entire team was with him, along with a full diplomatic delegation from Earth that had arrived just days earlier. Ambassador Taihyun looked nervous, but excited as he prepared to witness the most important treaty signing in human history. Queen Astra herself was the most changed of all. Her crystalline form still towered majestically above the assembled crowd, but the rigid patterns of light that had once flowed through her body had been replaced by something far more dynamic. Colors swirled and danced within her crystal structure in ways that seemed almost alive, reflecting the new flexibility of thought that contact with humanity had awakened in her ancient mind. "My people," she began, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber, "today we witness something that has not happened in over a millennium. Today we welcome true partners into our empire." The assembled Veltharans responded with a sound that was completely new to their species. Spontaneous applause that wasn't perfectly synchronized. Individual beings were expressing their approval in their own ways, creating a beautiful cacophony of crystalline sounds that rang through the chamber like music. General Crix stepped forward, carrying an ornate crystal tablet that contained the formal treaty. His transformation had been perhaps the most dramatic of all. The stern military leader who had once demanded humanity's destruction now moved with an almost playful energy, his crystalline form flickering with patterns that suggested curiosity and excitement rather than rigid discipline. "The terms of this alliance," he announced, "are unlike any treaty our empire has ever signed. Instead of demanding submission or tribute, we offer true partnership. Human and Veltharan forces will work together as equals. Our technologies will be shared freely. Our peoples will learn from each other." Ji-hun felt the weight of history as he approached the crystal tablet. The document itself was a work of art, carved from a single piece of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The terms were written in both human languages and Veltharan script, symbolizing the cooperation that would define their future relationship. As he prepared to sign, Ji-hun thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. Just weeks ago, humanity had been alone in the galaxy, unaware that they possessed something precious that older species had lost. Now they were partners with one of the most powerful civilizations in known space, and both species were stronger for the alliance. Minho, Yuna, and Hana stood nearby, watching their captain make history. They had all been changed by their experiences with the Veltharans, just as the crystalline beings had been changed by contact with humanity. Minho had learned to appreciate the beauty of perfect coordination, even as he taught the aliens the value of improvisation. Yuna had discovered new ways to communicate that transcended language barriers. Hana had found that science and art weren't opposites, but partners in understanding the universe. The signing ceremony itself was deliberately symbolic. Instead of a simple signature, Ji-hun placed his hand on the crystal tablet and spoke his commitment, aloud. The living crystal responded to his words, recording not just his agreement but his intentions and emotions. It was a level of trust that no species had ever been offered before. Queen Astra then placed her own crystalline hand beside his, and the tablet flared with brilliant light that filled the entire throne room. The treaty was sealed not just with words and signatures, but with a bond that connected the very essence of both species. "Let this moment mark the beginning of a new age," Queen Astra declared, her voice filled with hope and excitement. "An age when the galaxy is shaped not by fear and domination, but by cooperation and mutual growth." As the ceremony concluded, Ji-hun walked to the transparent crystal walls and looked out at the stars beyond. Earth was out there somewhere, small and blue and precious, no longer alone in the vast darkness. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not through conquest or submission, but through the simple act of being themselves. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders yet to be discovered. And now, for the first time in their history, humans would explore it not as outsiders looking in, but as partners in a grand adventure that would reshape the universe itself. Behind him, humans and Veltharans mingled freely, their differences becoming strengths, their unique perspectives combining to create possibilities that neither species could have imagined alone. The future stretched ahead of them, chaotic and beautiful and full of infinite potential.